Hello everyone and welcome to the She's4Sports Hockey is Her panel event. My name is Madison Cuckoo and I'm the volunteer lead at She's4Sports and I will be your MC for the night. Thanks. Hockey is a big part of my life, as I'm sure it is for many of you. Tonight we have the privilege of hearing the stories of 6 women who continue to blaze trails as players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who work in management and the front office. My perspective on hockey is primarily that of a hockey sibling. Granted, I played hockey growing up. When I switched from figure skating to hockey, I can remember the discussion on whether or not girls played hockey. Thankfully, through the work of women like our panelists, the conversation of whether girls should play hockey is no longer relevant. It turns out, skill-wise, I probably should have stuck to figure skating because landing an axel at 7 years old was way more impressive than my annual 0-goal seasons. In all seriousness, what had more of an impact on me are the lessons learned from my younger brother's professional hockey career. His journey navigating the hockey industry sparked an interest in the stories behind the game, which has proven to help me in my career in the media, especially now as I start a new role next week with Hockey Canada. More than ever, representation of women from diverse backgrounds at all levels across the industry is very important. I look forward to this discussion and hope that you all enjoy the evening. At this time, I would like you to meet our rock star and fearless leader, the founder of She's4Sports, Ainka Jess. Ainka is passionate about communications and empowering women and girls. She combined her love of sport and over 12 years of communications and media relations experience to launch this network, She's4Sports, an online and events platform that gives women a larger voice in sports. The Toronto-based network represents a community of almost 3,000 and growing, passionate women and men who want to amplify and celebrate the contributions of women in sports. Through her career, she has provided strategic communications and media relations support to various organizations, including CBC, Manulife, the City of Ottawa, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Ainka is also an avid speaker who likes to raise awareness on diversity in sports, women in leadership, and women in entrepreneurship. She's been featured on CBC's Metro Morning, Here and Now programs, along with various podcasts. Additional speaking engagements include Lean In Canada, CIBC's XX Design Challenge, and Rotman Commerce Women's Leadership Symposium. In 2017, Ainka was featured as one of 150 Black women making history in Canada for her work with She's4Sports in the Her Story in Black project, a joint initiative between CBC and How She Hustles. Ainka has a BA in English from York University and a diploma in broadcast television from Seneca College. Without further ado, Ainka Jess.
Thanks for the warm welcome, Madison, and I really loved your story in terms of your passion for hockey and how you've been engaged with hockey. And I'm really sad that she's going to Calgary, but I'm happy that she will continue to be a part of contributing to hockey with Hockey Canada, because she's pretty good. She's pretty awesome. She's been with us since we began the organization, She's4Sports. So a little bittersweet, but I know we'll still keep in touch. So thank you all for coming out to the 5th She's4Sports event. I can't believe how the organization has grown since I launched it in 2016. For some of you who don't know, She's4Sports is a grassroots organization that I started after hearing the stories of women who told me they weren't comfortable talking about sports, or they were shut out of conversations about sports by their male colleagues, or they didn't see women who looked like them being represented in sports, in the sports industry. They were also hungry for stories that addressed issues women face in sports like pay equity, discrimination, lack of resources for women's sport programs, etc. I created She's4Sports because I wanted to give women a larger voice in sports. Since the launch of the network, we've been able to address some of these issues via our digital content and features on women who are contributing to sports as Olympians, head athletic trainers, VPs of player development and operations, and et cetera. As you can imagine, we've covered and featured a lot of women through our digital content and some of our previous events that we held. And we've also fostered relationships with sports organizations who align with our mandate. One thing I've learned about building the organization is that change can be possible when platforms such as She's4Sports are created. In her book, Becoming, former First Lady of the United States of America, Michelle Obama, touched on this when she said, "If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's the power of using your voice." We all have a role to play in bringing more diversity and inclusion to sports, and I hope after hearing from these awesome women who work in hockey, you will feel energized to use your voice, resources, and influence to make this possible. So thanks for coming, and we're going to get into a really good discussion. And before we get into our discussion, Madison's going to come up and read the bios of our esteemed panel.
We'll start off with Kim Davis, seated right here beside Ainka. Kim Davis is the Executive Vice President of Social Impact, Growth Initiatives, and Legislative Affairs for the National Hockey League. Her role reports to Commissioner Gary Bettman in leading the league's efforts to increase fandom and value creation through increased youth participation, social impact, and outreach to new audiences. A highly respected leader in the corporate and philanthropic community, Kim joined the NHL from leading CEO advisory firm Teneo. As a senior managing director, she built and ran the firm's corporate responsibility and inclusive leadership practice, where she advised CEOs and Fortune 500 companies. During her 4 years at Teneo, she designed and built the Teneo Leadership Institute, a groundbreaking partnership with Cornell's Johnson School of Business and the Billie Jean King Leadership Initiative, in partnership with the legendary tennis icon Billie Jean King. Kim's career highlights include over 2 decades working with JP Morgan Chase and its predecessor companies, where she most recently served as Managing Director of Global Corporate Social Responsibility, President of the JP Morgan Chase Foundation, which is the 5th largest corporate foundation in the world, and as a member of the firm's executive committee. Kim's career also includes driving various women in leadership and diversity initiatives, including building the first Women of Color Affinity Group at Chase Manhattan Bank, developing a mentoring program for senior women that became an industry model, and later developing the initial corporate sponsorship model for Women Moving Millions. Next, we have Christine Simpson. Christine is a reporter with NHL on Sportsnet, appearing on Hockey Night in Canada, Scotiabank Wednesday Night Hockey, and Rogers Hometown Hockey. She has over 2 decades of broadcast experience and a lifetime of hockey knowledge. Christine has been the face of Sportsnet features and event coverage since the network's launch in 1998. A Western University alumna, Christine began her career in hockey as a marketing manager right here at the Hockey Hall of Fame. She also worked as an in-arena host for the Toronto Maple Leafs. After her work in public relations for Roots and involvement with the '96 Toronto Olympic bid, she assumed the role of rinkside reporter for the ESPN2 broadcast of the 1998 AHL All-Star Game. Her other career highlights include rinkside reporter for NHL broadcast on ABC, ESPN, and Versus, host of Captains on the NHL Network, and anchor for the New Jersey Devils broadcasts on MSG Network in 2010. Christine was also the host of Center Ice with Chris Simpson during the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver. Seated beside Christine, we have Sarah Nurse. Sarah laced up her ice skates at the age of 5 and has never looked back. The Hamilton native is an Olympic silver medalist, a professional ice hockey player for the Toronto Furies in the Canadian Women's Hockey League, and a member of Canada's women's national ice hockey team. Sarah also won gold with Team Canada at the 2013 IIHF U18 Women's World Championship, and in 2015 got a gold medal as the member of the national women's development team that competed at the Nations Cup. Sarah began her collegiate career as a forward with the University of Wisconsin Badgers in 2013-2014 and was named to the All-WCHA rookie team. Two things Sarah says she can't do without are fashion and French fries. Jennifer Chaffero is an assistant coach for the Scarborough Wexford Raiders, a team in the Junior A Hockey League. She's a Toronto native and has a diverse athletic background in various sports, including paddling, baseball, and track and field. Her passion for hockey led her to pursue coaching at age 18 and made history as the first female North American general manager of a men's professional team in 2017 with the Guelph Brewers of the 3HL Tour, a 3-on-3 pro hockey league. She currently works one-on-one with amateur and professional players as an advisor and development coach. Jennifer is also a lover of music, film, and literature, and says she spends more time at the rink than she does sleeping. Jessica Platt plays defense for the Toronto Furies in the Canadian Women's Hockey League. Her passion for skating started when she was 3 years old, and she has never looked back. Her journey to professional hockey includes a position as a skating instructor and competing in an adult recreational hockey league in Waterloo, Ontario. In 2016, she was drafted to the CWHL. Last year, she came out as the first openly transgender woman to play in the CWHL. Jessica also volunteers with You Can Play, an organization that's dedicated to the eradication of homophobia in sports. Through her work with the organization, she promotes equality and inclusivity in sport. Jessica wants to be a positive role model and show that you can be your authentic self and not have to give up playing the sport you love, because hockey truly is for everyone. And finally, to round out our powerhouse panel, we have Angela James, who is one of the first women and the first of color to be inducted to the Hockey Hall of Fame. She is also considered the first superstar of women's hockey. As both a player and an advocate, she led the way for women's hockey to be recognized locally, nationally, and internationally. She represented Canada for 7 years, winning 7 world championships, and was a member of the women's gold medal world championship team in 1990, 92, 94, and 1997. Her intensity made her one of Team Canada's greatest clutch performers, and in 2009, to honor Angela's contributions to hockey, the Flemington Arena was renamed to the Angela James Arena in her honor. She's also been inducted in Canada's Sports Hall of Fame and the International Ice Hockey Hall of Fame. The hockey trailblazer continues to work with organizations and the NHL to promote diversity in hockey. Angela is currently the coordinator of Seneca Sports at Seneca College here in Toronto. Without further ado, let's get into the panel discussion. Ayanka Jess is your moderator tonight, and here we go.
First of all, thank you so much for reading all their bios. I know that was a mouthful. It was a lot. Because they've contributed so much to the sport, and we had to try to cut some things down, but you guys are just amazing. So thanks, Madison, for that. My first question, I'm going to sort of draw towards Angela James on this question. And this question stems from, unfortunately, a recent article that was in the paper, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen it. It was the article with PK Subban. There was a young player in the States who was facing bullying and racist comments during his games. And PK reached out to him, as I said, I'm sure some of you guys already know about this story, just to encourage him to continue with hockey and not let anything that anyone says about you really deter you from the sport. Angela, it's unfortunate that in this day and age we're still seeing this. We're dealing with racism in sports, specifically hockey. For someone who's been in hockey for a long time, and you've seen a lot, are things getting better or worse when it comes to race relations between the league, fans, and the players? And what more can be done to change the culture in hockey?
Well, that's a tough question. Not just in hockey, but I think in all sport. I work in an athletic department, and we encounter a number of issues that take place, in particular soccer. Now, all we can do is educate and educate and educate and keep doing these kinds of things where there's acceptance and understanding and compassion. But unfortunately, we're not going to be able to reach everybody, but we can't stop trying. But I just think that in those situations where this is happening and they're being exposed, I think that in the long run, that's a kind of a reverse part of acknowledgement and understanding that is getting out there that it's not acceptable. And I think that for the athletes, the pro athletes, the executives and that are calling these people out, that hopefully we can put a stop to those kinds of racism.
Kim, I'd like to get you in on this conversation as well because, as we know, the NHL celebrated its 100th year anniversary about a year and a half or 2 years ago. And, Angela talked about education. So what is the league doing to educate, the public, to educate players, to reach out to fans, to let them know that this isn't acceptable? I know you've done a couple of interviews talking about changing the culture of hockey, and how do you do that with an institution that's been around for 100 plus years?
I'm glad you raised the issue of the article, and in fact there was an NPR interview this morning with the father and the young man Devontae who had this racial taunt. In the year that I've been with the league, I have probably received no less than 50 notes from parents sharing with me racial incidents that they've had with their children. And it's, in my opinion, unacceptable for us to be in 2019 and to continue to have this. And I think that it is time for us to take a more proactive posture in a leadership position in saying that enough is enough and it's not something we're going to stand for. I had a conversation with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner this morning about an action that I'm suggesting that we take alongside USA Hockey and Hockey Canada to state in unequivocal terms that this is unacceptable, this is not the culture, this is not the character of our sport. This is not what the Declaration of Principles stands for. And I think we have to demonstrate bolder leadership in saying that at some point there have to be consequences for coaches and for the adults that are part of our system that are allowing this to happen. So it is a priority for me. I know it's a priority for the commissioner. We're meeting on Monday to talk further about it. It's not enough, honestly, to just have PK or any player, reach out and say this is something that happens, or for a club to say, come on over and let's go to a game. It's like tucking someone in at night and giving them a warm cup of milk and saying everything's going to be okay in the morning. It's not. And so, we are going to do something different.
That sounds good, yes.
Yeah.
Jessica, I want to get you in on this conversation. Outside of issues with racism, there are young people also that are dealing with issues like bullying and peer pressure. Can you tell me how your work with You Can Play is helping to change the culture in hockey to be more inclusive?
I think a lot of it is education. Like Angela said, all we can do is educate and educate and educate. And I think personally, when I came out, it was so I could be visible, so I could show people that you can be who you're meant to be and still play hockey, still do the thing that you love. So by doing that, I'm trying to educate people and be a role model for anyone else like me, gay, lesbian, bi, trans, whatever. I think we just need to educate people, and hopefully it's going to get better from there.
Jennifer, as a coach, you coach in the junior hockey league. What are some of the challenges some of these young hockey players are facing? Whether it's a boy or a girl, and how are you helping them sort of figure all of this out and let them know that this isn't the culture of hockey as well?
Well, from my experience, most of the problem would stem with like management, and I think, to be honest with you, if I'm going to be frank, some people are probably not suited for the league working with kids hockey. Some of the problems I have is the kids aren't happy with, say, the head. Is this on? Head coach.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Just like, especially our billet kids that come in from the States and stuff, and they're thrown into a new country. Some of them don't really know the hockey culture here. They're with a family they don't know. They're stuck on team buses and rooms with a bunch of kids they don't know. And the struggle for them is basically the communication. I'm going to shout out to two of my billet boys out there. They're at the back there. They have so much difficulties as it is making that transition, but then having good leadership and people that support them, that are there for them. And that's what I am for them. Not only on the ice, but in the weight room, wherever I can be, I'm there for them. Once my boy, always my boy. So, yeah.
Sarah, I want to also get you in on this conversation. As Jennifer mentioned about the different pressures young athletes face, can you talk a little bit about that from your experience? And who are some of the people in your life that have helped you along the way, or have helped you, stay grounded, or just helped you in a sense of saying, you know what, stay motivated, you've got this. This is what your dream is. Keep on going with it.
Yeah, I think for me as a young kid, my dad was from the Caribbean, and I was a girl playing boys hockey until I was 11 or 12, and so I was kind of at odds a little bit, and so just having my family being so supportive and having people question me and question why I play hockey. I've been told so many times by people whose opinions that I don't need that I'm never going to make it to the NHL. Well, I'll be the first person. I never wanted to play in the NHL. I never had that delusion or anything like that. And so just having them being there and supporting me and say, you know what, if you have a goal, keep on going, keep trying to reach it, because it was so important just to have that goal and keep striving towards it.
Christine, whenever I talk to a lot of young women who say, what's She's4Sports about? Do I just have to be playing on the ice or on the field? And it's so powerful for young girls to see that there are multiple careers in sports. So can you touch a little bit about your career in broadcasting, and what advice would you give a young person who may want to get into sports broadcasting?
Well, I want to start by saying I am so excited to be back here at the Hockey Hall of Fame, where, as you mentioned, I spent 5 years as a marketing manager here. Never in my wildest dreams in the 1990s when I worked here did I think there would ever be a panel of women talking about hockey, let alone one who's actually a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame. So I want to start by saying we have definitely come a long way. So that's the good news. I still think we've got a long way to go. But when you talk about career choices, and I've said this before, when I was a little girl growing up, like Madison, growing up in a hockey family, hockey was a huge part of our lives. I mean, we watched Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday night. Two brothers played the game. I was involved in sports, but in my generation, growing up in the 60s and 70s, we didn't play hockey. Like, girls just didn't really even think of playing hockey. But I also never looked at Hockey Night in Canada and thought, well, I want to do that someday. I mean, because there was no one like me on that. It was a bunch of men, and it never even dawned on me. So my career, as Madison documented, I mean, a lot of it was marketing and PR, and then eventually my love and my joy and my knowledge of hockey combined with my professional work in the PR and marketing world with my job here. But it was only from being here and then kind of becoming the spokesperson on behalf of the Hockey Hall of Fame, just because no one else wanted to talk to the media that were coming here to do stories on the hall, that I would be interviewed by Good Morning America came here when we opened, all of the Canadian networks. And I was very comfortable talking about hockey on television. That landed me the job as the first in-arena host for the Toronto Maple Leafs back at Maple Leaf Gardens. And again, it's not something I strived for, because in 1995 that didn't exist until the Leafs approached me and said, hey, can you be a person that is in the stands and like giving out prizes and doing the move of the game? And I'm like, sure, I guess, okay. So for 3 years, I went from working all day at the hall, taking the subway up to college and doing game nights for the Leafs. Only because of all of that, and only because Sportsnet in 1998 decided to be a brand new network that was launching and was looking for new faces, new people, people that had maybe different experiences. We weren't just going to steal everyone from TSN because that was the only sports network in this country. It's only because of that that I even ended up in this industry. So I guess if there is a message, I mean, it's a different day and age now, but I would always say to anyone who now can look and see someone like me and like Tara Sloan and say, I want to do that for a living. Find your way and take any experience that you can get. Volunteer for things. Find your path, because there's always going to be a different way to get to where all of us are here, and you just have to find the way that is authentic to you. But if you dream it, you could make it happen.
I like that. It's very inspiring. Angela, I want to talk to you a little bit about access to sports resources, and what are some initiatives you're working on to help young girls, whether it's on the recreational level, house league level, to get access to hockey. As we all know, hockey is a very expensive sport. A lot of parents have to decide, do they put their kids in or not? Is there maybe another sport they should put their kids in, because financially it's not affordable for some people?
Well, I'm one of those parents that struggle to put my kids in hockey as well. It's very expensive. I have a son who plays junior A in Hearst, Ontario, very far north. And then I have a boy and a girl playing house league, and it is a struggle, to keep them, current and up to date, and they're in house league and they're struggling in house league, and it's just like, your mom's in the Hall of Fame, why can't you skate? Because you're so busy always coaching the whole team, you miss out on your own kids, so you have to put them in private lessons, and then it costs even more. But currently, I'm coaching a developmental stream team for young girls, bantam age. My daughter does play that. Previous years, I've coached the house leagues and rep, and I just kind of go in and out. Sometimes national programs, sometimes go back to the Adams, the house league. To me, it doesn't matter. Hockey's hockey. Throughout the years, boys as well. When I played the game, listening to everybody talk about their aspirations. Well, my aspirations were really to just get to a piece of ice and skate. It wasn't to play hockey, rep hockey, or anything like that. It wasn't until a neighbor said to my mother, your daughter can play hockey, you should get her in a league. And from that point, I went in and I played, but I played for the love of the game. I coach for the love of the game. I work in sport for the love of sport. And, I encourage, young girls, females, to follow their dreams and to get out there and put pressure on themselves. And don't be afraid to sweat. And
Hashtag, don't be afraid to sweat.
That's right. Don't be afraid to sweat. It's okay. Any chance that I can get to be involved in my spare time, I do that for the young girls.
Thanks. Kim, I wanted to stay on access to resources, hockey resources. What is the league doing to, expose other kids or other, boys or girls expose them to hockey to this group of people, and I'm mentioning that may not have the finances, or maybe they're not the traditional demographic that hockey traditionally, engages with. How are you trying to get these young people into hockey and let them pursue their dreams?
So a number of different streams of activity. The largest is the Industry Growth Fund, which many of you probably know about. It's a financial partnership between the National Hockey League and the National Hockey League Players Association. It's an $80 million fund over 3 years. It's now in its third year, and the intent of that fund is to identify ways to get more kids involved in the game and to grow fandom. So a big part of that fund was focused on learn to play, and both learn to play and learn to skate initiatives across Canada and across the US. And over the past 2.5 years, over 50,000 kids have been subsidized with equipment and with subsidies for their fees to learn to skate and to learn to play. Our biggest challenge is, in my opinion, the continuation programs that come out of the Learn to Play. So it's great to get new audiences excited about the sport and learning how to skate, and then there aren't really clear pathways often in different cities for kids to go beyond that. So you get a family excited, and then there's nothing beyond that. There are no recreation programs, there are no house leagues, and it's much more acute in the United States than it is here in Canada. So that's something that we're spending a lot of time working on through what we now call our play pillar, which is how do we think about making that ecosystem stronger so that when we get families engaged, that's great that we are attracting them, but we aren't retaining them. So how do we create that ecosystem? So that's one important stream. A second huge priority for us, which shouldn't be surprising to anyone on this panel, is girls hockey. We know that both for Hockey Canada and for USA Hockey, the greatest growth of the sport is in the girls' stream, and yet we haven't put resources behind girls' hockey. And so we recently at the league convened a women's advisory board, and I'm happy to say Angela James is on that advisory board, and we brought that group to New York in December to help us come up with a strategic pathway on what we're going to do to really grow the game with girls. And so we've got some exciting initiatives that are coming out of that, including the month of March is going to be focused on the amplification of girls and women in the sport across all streams, from those that play the game, those that work in the game, those that are in the front office, those that coach. So we are looking at amplifying the sport in that way. And then thirdly and importantly, for the past 20 years, the league has supported an initiative called Hockey is for Everyone. And across North America, there are 27 clubs that have historically been focused on bringing underrepresented groups to the sport. And in different cities, those programs exist in varying degrees, from our supporting them through charitable efforts to those programs being pathways for kids that are actually moving into elite play. The biggest part of that program is using hockey as an avenue for developing the skills necessary for people to be strong citizens and to be strong for the world of work. So academic support and all of the wraparound services that a kid that may not have all of the economic means necessary to be successful in the game are provided. And so we've put over $1 million in that program. And we're just going to continue to go deeper with all of those programs. We don't need to do a whole lot more to go wide. We just need to go deep.
Drill down. Sarah, I want to get you in on this conversation because Kim touched on the investments that the league's making now to ensure that young girls who get into the sport, it's a sustainable opportunity for them. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that professional female sports athletes have to deal with when it comes to pay equity? I mean, as we know, the U.S. hockey team, the U.S. women's hockey team, put a lot of pressure out there a couple years ago to make sure that they were being paid fairly and, similarly to the men's hockey team. And, they were able to really make some inroads and now are getting paid fairly. But, there is that constant issue that you hear with professional female athletes that say, this is my full-time job, but I really can't afford it. I have to take another job, or I've got to mortgage my home just to play professional sports. So can you touch a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I think that with the development and the growth of women's hockey, they've done an incredible job at the grassroots level. I think that there's so many more opportunities and programs for young girls to get involved with the game. And I think where we need more development, I'll say, is at the professional level, because there comes a point where you kind of look at yourself and you say, what's next? I played hockey for all of these years. Where do I go now? And I mean, just this year on our professional team, we've had to have a few girls step down because with school and work commitments, the thing that is going to get taken away is hockey. Because, when you're making $2,000 a year playing hockey versus a full-time job, hockey's going to be the one that has to go. And that's sad because these are incredible hockey players who have to take a step away from the game because they can't afford to be doing it. And I think, as a female hockey player, I don't expect to make millions and millions of dollars. That's not anything that I expect, but one thing that I hope in the near future is just kind of a livable wage. There's an interest in women's hockey, and I've seen it. I've seen it for years. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and we have a 3,000-seat arena, and we sold it out the entire season. I played in NHL venues this year with Hockey Canada, sold out crowds. And so I know that there is an interest for women's hockey, and if we can get the best players to continue to keep playing with kind of the incentive of that livable wage, I think it would be absolutely amazing.
And why can't women make millions of dollars too, playing sports, right? Just saying.
Baby steps, baby steps.
Jessica, do you want to comment on that?
I think, like Sarah said, that an incredible effort's been put in at the grassroots level, but there's a lot more work to be done on the professional level. Most of the players on our team, they work full-time jobs, they volunteer, some have families, and they somehow manage to play professional hockey as well. And it's for the love of the game, but how much better could they be if they earned a living wage playing professional hockey? They could train, they could use all the time that they spend on their full-time job training. They could be so much better.
Christine, the other side of this too, we talked a little bit about fan engagement. We talked about some of the things that the league is going to do to engage young girls. But then there's the broadcast coverage side. So, I've got a couple of tweets that I've seen people add me to or mention She's4Sports. They want me to continue to retweet and put it out there. There was a woman who said, Canadians want to see Canadians playing hockey. Hockey head office has to get these players media coverage. So people aren't afraid to get on Twitter now and say, I'm watching the coverage or the year in review coverage highlight package on a specific network, and where are the women's highlights? So, as I said, Canadians want to see women play. They want to hear more about women's hockey, but what's the responsibility and the accountability for the networks to actually put that content out there?
Well, I will say this because I have a perfect example of it that happened actually just this week. I was in Montreal on Saturday because I was working the Canadians game on Saturday night, but of course the women were playing that afternoon, so I had the joy of watching the all-female broadcast of the CWHL game on Saturday afternoon in Brossard, Quebec. And first of all, very proud of our network, Sportsnet, having the very first CWHL weekend to have the coverage that they did on both Saturday and Sunday. So I made a point of, because part of my job within any NHL game I do is to come up with little in-game stories. So I knew that I wanted to do an in-game story about the outcome of the afternoon's game. So I'd already told my producer, let's make sure we get some highlights, and Marie-Philippe Poulin's hat trick provided the highlight for me to do the in-game story. But as I'm doing the pregame show, and I had no idea what Ron McLean was doing in the pregame show, but he had Marie-Philippe Poulin as his guest on the pregame show doing a live, a broadcast talking about the game, giving it that coverage. So, and I just want to say, Ron McLean is one of the biggest supporters of women's hockey that I know, and he is in a position where he can make something like that happen. So shortly after that, Cassie Campbell, who is a fellow broadcaster of ours, we have this chain of emails where we can all send information. And Cassie, good on her, sent a note to everybody saying, when we do the plays of the week, you guys really should include some of the highlights from the CWHL games on the weekend. Now, I am not suggesting that someone else might not have thought to do that if Cassie weren't to mention it, but wouldn't be a huge stretch to think a lot of the male producers wouldn't necessarily think of including the CWHL highlights from the weekend in our plays of the week, which of course most of the time is the NHL highlights. So for Cassie to be in the position that she's in, or for me to be in the position that I'm in, or for Ron to be in the position he is in and be a huge supporter of women's hockey, that's how those things happen. And the more people that we have who are like-minded, men like Ron, or women who think of these things that men aren't necessarily going to have at the top of their mind, the more likely they are to become, oh, well, then that's just normal. Of course, we're going to have a female hockey player as part of the Hockey Night in Canada pregame show, or highlights from the CWHL be in our highlights of the week. So we're getting there.
Baby steps, but we're getting there.
Exactly. Baby
You
steps.
mentioned a good point too, because sometimes, when I plan my events, I'll get emails from people saying, "Can guys come to the event?" Like it's not a secret. They kind of sound like they're whispering on their emails, and we welcome everyone. I think men have to be at the table when we're talking about diversity inclusion, right? We all need to be there. We all need to bring our own perspectives and try to tackle this huge thing that we're trying to tackle. So yes, guys can come to the event. I'm glad I see some of the guys out there here.
Shout out to Shirley Najak, who's one of our top producers at Hockey Night in Canada, who is here, and of course Donovan Bennett, one of our great
Nice to
reporters.
see you
So
guys.
thank you for being here, guys. Means a lot.
Jennifer, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this very same thing, about engaging with men who are allies when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Can you touch on maybe someone throughout your career that was a male who has really said, you know what, I love what you're doing, I understand like there needs to be more women coaching, and someone who's really, maybe if they weren't a mentor, but something along the lines of that?
I'm going to be fully honest with you. They all say it. I haven't really met one that's followed through with. It's been difficult, I'm not going to lie. My avenue, for one, being taken seriously as a female, I coach boys hockey, just to be clear, has been a struggle. I go from team to team. I get taken advantage of, but I still, at the end of the day, I'm keep moving forward because this essentially is what I want. As for a mentor, it has to be Hockey Night in Canada. I'm not going to lie, that's what I grew up on. That's what inspired me. That's where I fell in love with the game. And I'm still seeking a mentor if there's anyone out there. But at this rate, it's friends of mine, like a friend of mine here, Steve, and just every experience. So I guess life and every hockey game I've been to, every hockey minute I've watched, has been my mentor, and it's been leading me to that.
Sarah, has that been the case for you, or are there male colleagues who are supportive of your career and have sort of motivated you, and they understand that we're talking about equality here, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think for me, actually my cousin who plays for the Oilers, he's always been absolutely incredible with me in my hockey career. I think it's funny, when we were playing minor hockey, and people would question again why I was playing hockey and being this girl, competing against them, and the only two people that are still playing hockey from our age group at a high level are me and my cousin. And he was just incredible to me growing up. I mean, he would always tell me, you can beat them on the ice, and then talk to them later, And so I think he's been great for me, just to have somebody to look to, and he's been so supportive of my hockey career. I remember when he was at the World Juniors, and they actually won gold, and I was in Germany at the time. We were constantly talking back and forth, texting with each other, just kind of keeping tabs. And so it's great that we have people like him that keep tabs on women's hockey and who think are important. This year, actually, we had the Toronto Furies sent us out to the Hamilton Bulldogs of the OHL, and they have been absolutely amazing and been great supporters of women's hockey. We've done a couple puck drops there, and they want to see the CWHL and professional women's hockey succeed, and so they've been great allies for us.
I want to touch on the career side of things because I know there are a lot of young girls out here who want to get into hockey. Kim, you don't have a traditional hockey background, but definitely have a huge role and responsibility with the NHL. Can you touch a little bit about what drew you to this role and sort of what you want to sort of accomplish? Through this role, and maybe looking back after, if this role ends and you do something else, what would you sort of want to be known for in this role?
Well, I won't be doing anything else. I'm too old. I'm on the back nine, I promise you. So my story getting into hockey is an interesting one. I was a consultant to the National Hockey League. And so I was brought in to help them think about all of the assets that they had facing off against youth hockey and community, and made some recommendations on how they could do it in a much more effective way. And as I got under the covers of the organization, and I did 50 interviews across the league and the clubs, I made some recommendations to the commissioner, which he probably didn't necessarily like. They're probably a little more provocative than he's probably had anyone say to him, which was okay because I'd gotten paid already. So, but all jokes aside, those recommendations were made in June, and I didn't hear from him until October, and I figured, that was fine. I gave them my best thinking. And I got a call from Gary, and he said, I'd like you to come in. And he said, a lot of the things that you said, I didn't necessarily want to hear and hadn't heard, but you really put something on my mind. And so he said, if you're really interested in change, why don't you come and help us change? And I was shocked because I had, that was not my intent. I had a job, I was fine. But I thought about it and I said, I'm 59 years old. I have been in investment banking, one of the toughest industries for women, people of color, for anybody. And wouldn't it be incredible to spend the last part of my career helping to change a sport that has, in many ways, so many misconceptions about it? And so that's how I ended up here. And so I'm committed to change. I mean, I am a change agent. I come from a history of fearless women. I've been in an industry. There's very little that anybody can present to me that scares me. So
you've seen all the fires already, right?
And I'm old, so what's the worst that can happen? So it's all good.
Angela, I want to, yes, that deserves an applause. Angela, you've accomplished so much in your hockey career. We've listed a lot of the things that you were able to do in the bio, and we talked about the arena that was named after you. Can you touch on the transition from playing professional hockey to working? I know you're working with Seneca now, but that discussion on professional athletes, once they're kind of maybe figuring out, maybe I'll retire, or maybe I'm not going to do professional sports anymore. Was that transition easy for you to get back into maybe the working world, as people would say, but use the skills that you have and have grown to, inspire change in your job, or to provide an organization with the skill sets that you have?
It's a pretty loaded question there. I'll try to go back a little bit to what Sarah was saying about the girls that are playing professional hockey and how they all have full-time jobs. And it's really sad to say that it hasn't changed in 30 years. I had to work full-time, play hockey, play for Team Canada, take leave of absence. Back in the day, on St. Louis, established school teacher, Stacy Wilson, had to, quit their jobs to play hockey. And they weren't going to get a salary. They got a stipend of very little. So, the sacrifices that the girls and the young women make today for our game is incredible. And, I look at even, my son and Junior, I'm paying for him to play, but the opportunities that he gets compared to even the professional girls, which might be, 2 practices a week, if you're lucky. Thank God for the sponsorship that you receive from the China team, Chinese, and then in the U.S. as well, they're a professional sponsor. I don't know a lot about that, but I know we talked on. I don't really want to comment on Gary's
I was going to say,
initiative.
I was going to talk to you
I was going
about
to
that
ask him
because
that if I
sometimes
could know, but I won't.
women don't
won't
get
go
the
there.
same sponsorships as men do. So, but
Right.
yeah.
But we're very lucky, or they are very lucky right now that they do have some sponsorships there. As far as carrying over sport leadership, your opportunities, your that you've already had from this point, and sharing it with the girls, and talking about putting on the red and white, and how every time you do that, you're playing for your country, and when you go to the office and you're in the office and God knows you've got this person trying to make trouble with this person, and you're trying to bring them all together and work as a team. All of the attributes that you get through playing with team, and that you can carry over into the workplace is just invaluable. I've used it constantly, a number of tactics that I would use in the workplace that I would use in the dressing room. Whether I was a captain or not a captain, it's very transferable, and it goes a long way. And when you're offering advice, and you can go back to the stories of hockey and saying how this happened or this occurred, this is what we did. So you've got all the stories and experience, and that's kind of how I've lived my life, and that's how I work with my groups at work. It'd be nice if hockey paid me what work paid me. Then you don't have to do it all, because at the end of the day you're exhausted. But I wouldn't trade anything. But I think the time is now that we have to get these girls a half-decent living for playing the great sport that we all love.
Jessica, I wanted to get you in on this conversation. Despite the challenges women who are playing professional hockey face, despite what we were talking about, that progress is slow, what has kept you in the game?
Honestly, it's what I love to do. Ever since I was 3 years old, first put on my skates in my ice rink in the backyard, it's been what I loved. Growing up wasn't exactly easy for me. I had a lot of issues surrounding the change room, more specifically in the atmosphere surrounding boys hockey. But on the ice and playing hockey, everything went away. Everything was amazing. I had to quit for 7 or 8 years to figure out what I needed to do to make myself happy and to pursue that. And I wanted to come back and play hockey at whatever level I could. And I came back more motivated than ever, and actually train. And, I work harder than I've ever worked at anything in my life. And what keeps me playing hockey is just love of the game.
Sarah, I'd ask you the same question as well.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I get asked all the time, why I'm still playing hockey, and I look and I think of, my male counterparts who are my age and who are some of the best in the world. Nobody's asking them why they're still playing hockey. I think that's maybe issue number one, but I have to agree. I play hockey because I love it, and it's one of my strengths. It was something that I've been good at since I was a young child, and everybody in here is attracted to what they're good at. And so it's just been an outlet for me. If I'm feeling down or I'm feeling overwhelmed, if I don't want to do any schoolwork, I'll go out on the ice and shoot some pucks. I think it's just been something for me that I've always had to fall back on. No matter what's going on in life, no matter what's happening, hockey's always been there. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people within the sport. And so I think it's just been an incredible outlet for me.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, Christine, and talk about, we touched a little bit on fan engagement, but looking at the way broadcasting has changed with digital content and social media, how else can networks really tap into social media to really speak to different communities, engage them on the sport, educate them, and just bring them into a two-way conversation?
Well, so much has changed. Again, just going back to 1998 when I started with Sportsnet and we first went on the air, and the concept of even like a website to be able to post video wasn't even a thing, let alone now. I use Twitter's actually one of the most important tools in my toolbox, because I'm not necessarily going to assume people are tuned in live watching a game, although I still think sports are the one thing people do want to tune in live to watch. But if not, if I've done, a feature, a story with a player, if they didn't catch it on the broadcast, to be able to tweet it out and know it's getting to the world, basically. There are just so many different platforms, let alone podcasts. I didn't know what a podcast was, and now I love listening to 31 Thoughts, the podcast, and so many other things that are out there. And for us at Sportsnet, we sort of floated the trial balloon last year of ice surfing on Twitter. And now every Tuesday night you can watch Jeff Merrick and whatever co-host basically bounce around the entire league and give you a sense of what's going on in the league on Twitter. So there are just, social media, I think, as we all know, can be a cesspool, but it can also be something really positive that if we use it that way, you can reach so many different people. But I also give a lot of credit to the league. We in many ways take our lead from, if we know hockey is for everyone, we're going to think, okay, hockey is for everyone, or Black History Month, or, all of these, or just last week, the Next Generation game that the Toronto Maple Leafs did, and I had a 13-year-old Abigail Dove, reporter, following me along and doing the broadcast with me. And the fact that she at 13 looks and says, oh, I've watched you since I was a little girl, and so I know that that's what I want to do. Well, I think that's fantastic. So, I give a lot of credit to the league and to the teams and to our networks, in many ways, of trying to think outside of the box. And a lot of times when I do have young women, mainly, because that's who do come up to me now and say, can I take you for coffee and just ask you a little bit about what you do, because I think I want to do what you do. I often put it back to them when they're like, well, what's the next thing? And I'm like, you're going to know the next thing before I am. I'm on the back nine as well. And so, there are things that are a big part of the hockey broadcasting landscape that didn't exist before. And I just know there are going to be more, but I look to the young people in this room to figure out what they are and how that can also reach more people and make everyone feel like hockey is accessible and something that, you don't have to be a certain status in society to be able to be a fan of or a part of.
I'm told I have 4 minutes. Is that what you said? 2 minutes. Okay. So my final question for all of you is going to be, in your mind, what will the industry and women in hockey look like in the next 10 to 20 years? And I'll ask each one of you guys. So who wants to start first?
I'll start. Go for it. Where I see women in hockey in 10 years or 20 years is going to be in a good place, because I'm advocating towards that. I'm still in my prime here. And my goal since I was about 5 or 6 years old was to be the first female NHL coach. And I'm still going after that goal. I'm going to get there. So I see it going in the right direction, and I'm on board, and all the support that we can get is welcomed, and social media, as you said, is the best tool. So we need everybody's voice and projecting us women, players, media, VIPs, all of us. And yeah, passing it, who's next? There we go.
I think in 10 to 20 years, women's hockey is going to be in a much better place. I've seen so much growth in the CWHL in the last 2 years, growth of the fan base. They started playing players. I think it's just going to go upwards from here for women in hockey. And with role models like the people on this panel here, I think it's going to be bad. It's going to be good.
I think that we definitely, there's no other place to go but up, that's for sure. But I also think that we as women in the sport industry, we have to celebrate all of our successes. We have to embrace every moment, everything that's great about women in sport, in the industry, and celebrate it and report on it and tweet on it, and let's not knock each other down or be jealous that one person's getting ahead of the other. Be glad for them, and the more we get out there, the more opportunity it's going to be for you anyway, because it's just going to increase, because the CEOs, the guys that are up there, are going to want to bring more women in, and like the panel here, and but that's one thing that I see we really need to improve on. As far as our game, I've been watching the grassroots right up to the midgets, the bantams, and the intermediates play, and there's some phenomenal hockey players, and that's just in Ontario, even though that's Canada, isn't it? No. And I know in Thunder Bay, United States, Europe, there are some great hockey players coming through, and that have been there, and the role models. Hopefully some of us old people on the back nine are going to come back around and really stay involved and grow our great game.
I think for me, I just want to see more women everywhere. Whether it's in the broadcast booth, whether it's sports analysts, behind the scenes, refereeing, playing. I just want to see more involvement, having the confidence to be involved. Obviously, right now it's a male-dominated sport, and I think the women need to have the confidence to join the conversations and to not be afraid to speak, tell their opinions, and speak their minds. I think just being with these women on this panel, they've trailblazed and they've paved so many paths for us. So I want to kind of help to be that voice and to make things better for the next generation than I had for myself.
And I want to use the words of Ron McLean, which he gave me just moments before this evening, is be bold. And as you said, women need to be bold, to go for it. I think also, there should be more opportunities for women, as many of you have said, in all the different facets of our game. So whether beyond the women's game, whether it's the New York Islanders, who have a female host, a female color analyst, and a female play-by-play person, that should be normal instead of weird and odd. And it will take guys that are CEOs, or maybe women that are CEOs, or women who are in positions of power in the National Hockey League and other organizations within hockey that make the bold decisions, because sometimes men actually, I think, are afraid to make the bold decisions that allow things like this to happen.
And it is going to happen, because I just look at the Board of Governors for the National Hockey League. And so I've been with the league for a year. Heidi Browning, CMO, I'm there. Heidi's there 2 years, I'm there a year. We've changed the complexion just with the two of us in the last 2 years, and the conversation, more importantly, around the decision-making table about the sport, things that maybe the guys weren't thinking about. And it's not that anybody's got poor intentions, it's just that that's not their perspective. That's what diversity is about. It's about bringing different perspectives, and that's why you want the broadest swath of thinkers around the table. So it's going to happen. And as Billie Jean always said to me, just go for it. So let's go for it.
Well, I really wish I had more time to talk to these women. As you guys can see, they've got a lot to say. They're in positions of power to help change the culture in hockey, and they're just phenomenal. So thank you guys for coming out and sharing some of your thoughts with us today. We're going to open the floor up for questions, and how it's going to work is Madison's going to moderate the Q&A.
So thanks so much for all of you guys for being on the panel. You're an inspiration to all of us here, and a great time listening to you. Question with respect to just women's sports in general, hockey, basketball, everything. A lot of the problems around people being able to watch games is with respect to scheduling and accessing games. And so when you look at basketball games, they're played at the same time as, let's say, the NCAA March Madness games, and everyone is watching the men's games. Or they're played at 1 p.m. in the afternoon when everybody is busy throughout the day versus 7 p.m. at night when everybody is going to be watching the Leafs games. Or they're played out in Etobicoke instead of being played at the Scotiabank Arena, which is so much easier for everybody to access with public transit. So where do you guys kind of see that going in terms of scheduling, and so that maybe other companies, TSN, Sportsnet, and whatnot can actually broadcast at those times where people are actually wanting to watch sports and watch women's sports?
I just watch it. I don't program it, so I actually honestly don't know what goes into it, perhaps. Perhaps Shirley Najak, our producer extraordinaire, could give some insight since he so kindly decided to join us here.
Thank you for your question. I think from the programming perspective, you go back to the words of being bold or making noise about it. And I think it's also hitting hard against the sponsors. When there's somebody driving a product and when there's sponsors that are actually getting behind it, that's where the programming networks will actually listen to it. But in my mind, it shouldn't just take a sponsor. It should take a mandate. It should be a target that these games are just as important as the men's games. It's like prize money. The prize money should be the same. Everything that you've talked about. It is just inherent in what we are, what we do, that things should be equal. Whether it's everything across the board that you're saying or whether it's programming. That's one element of it, but I think it's just holding leaders, holding people accountable, but also holding each other accountable when we see something that's not equivalent enough. That's what I say.
Thank you first for all being here and for being role models for every woman that's interested in hockey. I have a kind of an open question. Anyone can jump in and take this, but I want to know what you would say to a 13-year-old girl who came up to you. She plays house league hockey, and she tells you she wants to quit hockey because she doesn't see a future for herself in being a professional athlete.
As a coach, I face that with the boys all the time. I'm actually dealing with that right now with one of them. They've come to a point where they don't know if they want to continue for whatever reason. I literally sit down with them and I talk about why they started playing hockey, and I make them remember that love. And it falls back into that initial feeling that brings them, like Sarah said here, the love of the game, and they forget their problems. And that's why I said before that you need to have good role models in hockey, especially youth hockey, both boys and girls, because we're shaping these kids' minds. And I just love them as much as they love hockey, and it works, and I have no quitter so far. So anyone else want to touch on that? Yeah, you can.
I coach that age group. One thing that I try to do with the young girls is to make sure that they feel a part of it. More importantly, not so much on the ice, but off the ice. So in the dressing room, when we're doing some team building, that nobody's left alone, nobody's left aside, and I make them come together and feel, a part of the team. And yeah, they're quirky, like every 13-year-old girl's quirky with the big braces and, doing all those things and just kind of nerdish. But, nerd is good. Being a nerd is good. And we want you to be a big nerd on our team. So we want them to feel a part of it, be inclusive, and for the most part, we retain those girls. Same thing, not just a 13-year-old, but just women in sport. I think it's a big issue, but it is about retaining them and finding their love.
This is a question for anyone that plays hockey. I just bought my first hockey stick and I'm 23. What's the best way to learn how to play hockey when you're 23?
Practice. Like with anything, you're only going to get better with practice. I know there's a lot of good YouTube tutorials. It's how I learn to do a lot of random things that if I'm interested in it, I'll YouTube it and learn how to do it. But yeah, just practice, get out there, put yourself out there, join a team, go to a pickup game. I know it can be intimidating to go if you don't know anyone, but just go out there. People are going to be supportive, ask questions. People are willing to help. Just put yourself out there and practice.
Well, we have a Toronto Furies adult skill session if you want to show up to that on next Wednesday. But my biggest thing would be don't be afraid to fail. Think of when you're that kid, you're fearless. You're not afraid to fall. You just pop right back up and keep going. And my biggest thing is don't be afraid to fail. Just if you can't get something, if you don't pick it up quickly, just keep going. I think coming into a sport at 23, that takes a lot of courage. Trying to pick something up when you're a little older is definitely more difficult, and I would say just keep sticking with it. That's so inspiring for me to hear. I think that for me to try a sport at 24 would be a little intimidating, so I applaud you.
Good evening, great panel. So I have a two-parter, and I hate to be inflammatory, so get ready. Right. I grew up watching hockey all my life, commentators, players, the works. We've been talking tonight about diversity, being inclusive, making sure everyone has access to the sport. Fantastic. We're in 2019. Is there room, and I know Ron McLean's here, is there room in 2019 for the kind of commentary that we hear from time to time from Don Cherry? That's A. B, will there ever be another Manon Rhéaume?
We all come from the same place, and that is Don coached, believe it or not fear. And we do love the game, and some of the things, I don't know if this is where you're going with that idea, but we are so committed to, Don always had, he had 11 20-goal scorers on the Boston Bruins. No team has ever had more 20-goal scorers in the history of the NHL because he made everybody feel valued and everybody feel a part. And I know sometimes Don insists on shirts and ties and certain things that may seem culturally or ethically defined, but good. As Angela says, you need a little nerd. You need a little, we all have opinions, millions of opinions. But put together, they don't usually comprise a point of view. Don is a point of view, and that's hard to come by. And he's living with his, and I love him for it. And then, there's lots of us to have different points of view, but it's really, really important to encourage that. So I'm grateful for, as we all are, for Don and his love of the game, and his love more than that of inclusion. That's why he had 11 20-goal scorers. So I'll say that part. If anybody wants to jump on that, but then also diversity. For sure, I just so admire tonight for that being our ethos. Tara here, Tara Sloan's host of Rogers Hometown Hockey with me, and from the beginning, that was her, insistence that we do a land acknowledgement to open the telecast. Obviously, we had the other night and this would be a question for you to follow up, but I'll let you finish with that question. But mine would be, because we had Natalie Spooner and Sammy Jo Small and Geraldine Heaney and Fran Ryder and Hazel McCallion. These are all pillars of the women's hockey game. And Tara said, if I could have a dinner, just one dinner, and sit down with a table of women, it would be those 5. Pick a woman, each of you, that you've not met, or that you've met if you want, but I prefer it's that you've not met. If you could have dinner with one woman that you really admire from a distance, who would that be? Did you get the second part though, Don? Was there room for Don? What was the second part of the question? Oh, Manon Rhéaume. Yeah, so that's good. You take that, and then carry on with who are you going to take to dinner?
Were you referring to the goalie that played with the? Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't see it with how the game, how fast it is, and I mean it's different. Women and men are built differently. I would fully support like co-ed preseason games, but do I see a female player in the NHL at any given time? Personally, I don't see it. I've been watching it for, how old am I? 35 years, and it's tough to say. Yes. And it's like, it was such a nice experience to have. I actually have some of her hockey cards still. And I think maybe it would be nice for one of the girls to touch on that too, with regards to if they see a female breaking, maybe not playing regular season game, but definitely preseason.
Yeah, I think with regards to that, I mean, obviously Marie-Philippe Poulin is a huge name in women's hockey, and I don't know how many of you have seen her practice, because it's equally, if not more impressive than how she plays during a game. And I think if you would bring her to an NHL practice, she would impress a lot of the team out there, including the staff and everybody. And so I don't know if there'll necessarily be a female playing in the NHL, but I think that so many teams have taken so many strides bringing national team players out to practices, and they continue to impress. And so I think that's been great.
Kudos to Kyle Dubas and the Toronto Maple Leafs for hiring Haley Wickenheiser. I mean, when you have women players helping teach NHL players how to play the best game, that's pretty impressive too. Says a lot about the women, and it says a lot about a man like Kyle Dubas, who is in charge to make a decision like that.
And it's happening all over. I mean, we got a woman in Arizona.
Barb Underhill here too, yeah.
My name is Moisin Hasham. I'm the executive director and founder of an organization called Hockey for Youth. And so we focus on newcomer high school students, both boys and girls. We have a couple of our young ladies here, Javeria, who's from Pakistan, and Fadila, who's from Syria. So my question is related to barriers. I know you guys have talked about a lot of the success that you've either had in the past or you're trailblazing right now. What are some of those barriers that you guys have you ladies have had to overcome? Or if you could share a story of a time where you had to kind of continue to push through so you could get to that next stage.
A lot of the barriers I faced are people telling me what I can and can't do and kind of trying to push their opinions on me. I think you just kind of have to push through. You have to take time, look within yourself, and figure out what you need to do for you to make yourself happy, to do whatever you want to do. And you leave the negative comments, you leave the naysayers behind you, and you set a goal and just look forward towards that goal.
I think for me, with kind of the breaking barriers and getting past things, I think I kind of had to not only have that support system to lean on, but look within myself and really question what I wanted and what I wanted to go after. And when I did that, when I kind of did some reflection, if what I wanted outweighed the barrier, what people were saying, I kept pushing forward, because in all reality, that's what meant the most to me. And so there have been times when, I've been questioned for being a girl, when, people would look at my parents in the stands and see my dad's black, my mom's white. Why are you playing hockey? Why aren't you playing basketball? Why, different crazy things like that. And I've kind of had to just look past that and keep pushing through and think, you know what? People don't expect me to do this, and people don't think that I can do this. Let me prove them wrong. And so I think that's been something huge for me.
My name's Deborah, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this panel tonight. I've very much been looking very forward to it. I have been really taking in a lot of the feedback and the comments, and a fire that maybe was a little bit dim as we're coming into the new year and we got to go back to work. You've certainly rejuvenated it. Putting a little bit of a different spin, let's kind of turn the business tap on. And we all are in love with hockey and other sports, but at the same time, we're all making a living. We're looking to make ends meet and making a dollar. So I'm just wondering, from all of this passion, what do I do with it? How do I put it into the different departments in order for me, as a Canadian in the sporting goods industry, to make a dollar, to make more of a dollar, to make more of a statement? How do you merge those two very core beliefs to live day to day? Is there a mantra? Is there anything that, maybe Kim or Christine, anyone on the panel, that sort of is a little niggly in the back of your head that you've sort of sworn to almost not necessarily every morning when you wake up, but something that's motivated you?
Well, I would say generally my mantra is that every day there's going to be something that scares you, and despite being scared, you have to keep going. And my grandmother taught me that. So my grandmother, my father's mother, Dr. Rose Butler Brown, was the first African-American woman and the second woman in the first graduating class at Harvard in 1929. And she told me so many stories about, first of all, the other woman, who was a white woman, wouldn't study with her. So to Angela's point about part of what we have to do as women is to make sure we're supporting each other. Throughout my career, I've been successful not at the hands of women mentors, but at the hands of men. And one of the things that Billie Jean has said to me for the many years that I've known her is that we as women have to make sure that we have men as allies. And all of the things that we did through Billie Jean's leadership initiative, she insisted that all of our events had no less than 50% men, because she felt like we needed to make sure that men were understanding what the issues of women were. So I think that every day it's going to be a battle, but if you're going to play, you might as well win. And so be in it to win it, and that's sort of my mantra, and that's how I think about it.
Thank you, Kim. I kind of just want to go with what you just said, that men kind of need to understand the issues that women are facing. I think I've kind of noticed, especially in the NBA, there's so many superstars that have come out in support of the WNBA. Andy Murray had come out in support of equal pay for women in tennis. For all of you guys, do you think that the NHL players should share responsibility to promote women's hockey? And for Kim, is that something that the NHL as a league is working on in the future?
Yeah, I think the players do. I think that if you talk to players, they are big supporters of women's hockey. I mean, I've talked to players who said they grew up playing with women, and these players have said that. There are a lot of complications around the situation with women's hockey. And what I will tell you is that the league and Gary are very committed to women's hockey, but there are a lot of things that have to be reconciled for that for this to work better. And I'm not avoiding, but I am avoiding because it's more complicated than we all think it is. Even the players of both the Canadian and the U.S. Leagues don't really understand a lot of the underlying issues because they aren't shared that broadly. So it's going to happen. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some pain, but I think we'll see some change in the next 5 years.
I just like to say too, from where I sit, it's the same that you want to have sort of fair representation, and if you see something that looks out of whack, you should say something. And I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know a lot of people would look and go, "Oh, well, yeah, you've made it." But in a way I have, but in a way I still see inequalities everywhere I look, even within my own network. One ironic situation a year ago when my network decided to do a promotion, a promo that ran about Hockey Night in Canada, and it was me saying how, when I grew up, there were no women on Hockey Night in Canada, but I'm so proud now to be on Hockey Night in Canada and to often have young women come up to me and say, I want to do what you do, and I applaud all of that. So that promotion launched on All-Star Weekend last year while I was sitting on my couch watching 17 men do the English and French broadcasts of the All-Star game. And so I sort of sat there and thought, what's wrong with this picture? I don't want to be the poster girl for women in broadcasting if you're actually not even going to use me for the broadcast that you're happy to launch this promo on. So fortunately, our leader at the time, who Kim knows, I had a boss that I knew, actually I didn't know. I was a little scared because I'm basically writing an email, and I wrote the email and slept on it and looked at it again in the morning, basically saying, I need to talk because something's just wrong with this. Fortunately, I had a boss who was very open about hearing what I had to say and actually seeing it for what it was, even if no one else actually thought of that ahead of time and how that would look. But I think that's part of it, that when you're in a position that some of us are in, to be able to force that issue, whereas I would say even a few years ago, I would have been scared to death to say anything because I was just happy to be here. I have a job. And now I feel more of a responsibility than I've ever felt before to speak up when there is an inequality that, of course, I know has been there for years, but I'm bold, Ron, and I will speak up and point it out. And luckily so far, for the most part, a lot of people have listened. I still don't think they totally hear, but I'm going to keep talking.
So this kind of goes towards, Kim, what you had said about men needing to be allies with women as well. In my experience, I'm a young sports reporter myself. In my experience, I've had more men be an ally, and I've run into more issues with women wanting to be the only women or the only woman in the hockey world, or I'm the only woman who covers this team. And I've had more issues with women being rude to me than men. They're the ones that are more open to help me out. So have any of you experienced that? I see a lot of nodding heads. So if you've experienced that, what should I do?
Let it go in one ear and out the other ear. Anything that you absorb only slows you down. So just keep going. Like it's been said, be bold. You've got a desire burning inside of you. You have that for a reason. So follow it, and don't let anyone tell you you can't do it, because you're going to do it. And women are hard. We're not all as gracious as we are in this room. And as much as we should be supporting one another, a lot of us don't. And in that circumstance, all you can do is just smile and wish them the best, because you're going to shine. You're in the right direction.
I also think you have to, as I say, call it and name it with women. I think that oftentimes we are our own worst enemy because we divide along racial and ethnic lines, and we are so much more powerful if we are a cohesive group. And I experienced that, you can imagine, 35 years ago, as we both said, being in an industry where there weren't any women generally and no women of color. And as the industry was growing, instead of women thinking about the pie getting larger, they were thinking about the pie shrinking and having to slice up more pieces, and therefore we were competing. And men see it, and they don't think it's cute. They really say, how can you expect men to support you when you don't support each other? That's the conversation that I would hear in the boardroom when I was the only female. And so you have to just say that and show leadership with women, and to call it when women aren't acting right, because we aren't going to be successful if we don't control our own destiny, in my opinion.
I'm going to add something to this conversation. When I I launched She's4Sports in 2016. A year passed, and we were building our social community. And then I think it was around late 2017, I had a woman, she called me, got to talk to me, and said, "Oh, I wanted to start something like this sports thing that you're starting," and kept on lamenting about, why she wanted to do it first. And I let her talk, and I said, "You know what? Why don't you start whatever initiative you want to start, and once you put it out there, send it to me, and I'll help you promote it." Sometimes it's exactly what you said. It goes in one ear. It's, you wish everybody the best, and you have to take that position of, I'm not going to sort of get down to your level. I'll promote you. I'll support you. Yeah, and kind of that's the response I had for this person.
Hi, so this is my question for Christine, just because I'm also getting into the media and marketing side of things. And as someone who also grew up with sport around me my entire life, but it only actually clicked when I was 20 years old, trying out the second program in university. And I mean, my dad tried, and he succeeded at making me a Leafs fan. Before I worked there, I won Leafs tickets because of our basement. But but basically, one thing that I have dealt with a lot since getting into the sport industry, especially so later in the game, in terms of how old I was, I get a lot of feedback that you don't know what you're talking about, you don't belong here. So I would love to know if you still feel, if you get that, be it through social media or through other people who say that, look at you and go, you don't know what you're talking about, and then how do you combat that?
So first of all, when you talk about getting into it sort of late in the game, I actually got into broadcasting, I was 34 years old. So it's never too late, first of all. But secondly, I mean, it's probably true that you're going to have to be better than all the guys to even try to be treated equally to the guys. And if you mispronounce a player's name, yeah, you might be in a YouTube highlight, but the guys can get away with it. There are certain inequalities that are just there. And we're all working towards calling them out and to making a difference. But you also just need to know that's probably going to follow you, just like everyone has their thing that they have to deal with. So life isn't fair. You're probably never going to be treated equally. We'd love to think that you are, but you're probably not. So you probably do have to work harder and be better. But if you have decided that that is what you really want to do, doing that will fulfill you and be what you love. I mean, I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I do have a lot of young women who love to talk to me about what, how do I get into it and what do I do and this. And I've always find it interesting. There are different reasons why people want to get into this industry. And a lot of it is, I'm a big fan and I love it. And that's fantastic. But when you start really letting them understand, okay, so there's not a teleprompter when you're there, like someone hasn't written what you're going to say. Oh, okay, all right. So you have to come up with your questions and you have to come up with your story ideas. Or if you're an anchor, you have to, research and write. Oh, and you have to work every weekend? Oh, okay. So every Saturday night, you're not with your friends or your boyfriend, or and you have to travel a lot. And so for 9 months out of the year, your life is basically revolving around hockey. Or in my case, hockey, in other cases, other sports. Sometimes just the reality of what it actually means to be a committed hockey player or a committed hockey broadcaster makes you maybe just rethink it as to whether it is something you really want to do. And part of that would be also on social media. Have horrible things said about you. Sasky knows what I'm talking about. I will say for me, if I did start in this industry and social media was around when I was starting, and let's say I was, 20 years old and just doing it, I would probably be devastated by the things that people say. Luckily, with age comes confidence, and I really could care less about what, some faceless, nameless person thinks about me. because I know what I am, but it's hard. I'm not going to kid you. It's hard, and it can, eat you up and chew you out if you let it. So you're ultimately going to be the one who really decides if it's what you want to do, if you do get the opportunity to at least see what it is like and get a chance to understand. But just know the reality that it's not easy, and you are going to have to work harder than probably the guy next to you.
So I work in sports medicine in baseball. And so my question is more about getting women in positions working with teams in the NHL. I don't know if there are any currently as far as athletic trainers, physios, massage, and how that can start to change. I know it's a team-by-team basis based on ownership and management. It's great that Wickenheiser's been hired as a coach, and I know it's changing on the side of scouts and coaching, but in the sense of women working in the clubhouse, in the locker room, on these athletes, are there things that the league can sort of try to trickle down to teams and management to say that there is, is there an actual hiring, diversity and inclusionary mandate, or is it just based on a team-per-team basis?
So most of what you've just described is based on a team-by-team basis, but one of the things that we are launching for the first time in the league, better late than never, is a diversity and inclusion council that is being co-chaired by Gary Bettman and Kim Pagula, who is a female owner of the Buffalo team. And my point to the league was that we can't be talking about new audiences and diversity and inclusion externally if we don't have the culture internally to support that. So we are launching that. We are starting that. It's going to be focused on sort of three pillars as I think about it: marketplace, which is what we do externally; talent, people, which is our hiring practices; and then development, so mentoring programs and employee networking groups, so that we begin to engage different audiences. The league, as the North Star, can influence what directions the clubs take as it relate to hiring, and so that's something that we will do. It's probably not going to happen next week or next year, but it's something that we're talking about.
I always find when you're working directly with the athletes, they don't care. If you know your job and do your job, they're happy to work with you on that level, and it always just seems to be, whether it's the coach or the GM that just has, whether it's just an old school attitude about it, that you're there to pick up players, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
When all you want to do is just work with athletes and help a team win.
That's not an area that I have spent a lot of time with, but I hear a lot of commentary about it, and I know it's an area that we probably need to do a lot of work in.
Can I just mention, too, that I think a lot of the players, that you may be dealing with, and I know this is looking farther ahead, but I think when I started, a lot of the players that I was the one interviewing them while they were players, they are now the coaches and the GMs and the presidents of the team. So everything, every inroad you're making with those players today and others have made over the years, I'd like to think also helps change the landscape, even though, as Kim said, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I think just that situation there, knowing some of the pro athletes that really don't mind, but it's when they go home at night and their wives are asking, who's working on you and so on and so on. And, we're human. And I think those are some of the situations there.
First of all, thank you to all of you for giving your time tonight. It means a lot, and for Ron and Tara as well. And shout out to Tara. I know you always try to include women's hockey in your tweets if you can't fit in the broadcast, so thank you for that. My question is for Christine and a little bit Kim. You mentioned you often take the lead from the leagues on some of the coverage that you're able to integrate, and how you use the plans that the Kims of the world have made to increase coverage. What advice would you have for Hockey Canada, for the CWHL, for even the players in the CWHL to help make that easier for you so that you can take that lead?
I mean, I guess it's all about communication. It's all about, I go back to social media. Some of the best story ideas that I find is just by going through Twitter or on Instagram. I'll see a picture or I'll see a story that might prompt me to go, I don't even know who that person is, but that sounds like a really interesting story. So I would just encourage anyone to get their message out there. I mean, She's4Sports is another example of that. Like, I don't know who you are. You call me, I get an email, and then I go on and I'm here. I'm only here because I talk to you, and then I go to your Twitter and Instagram, and I'm like, oh, and that just, and again, in so many ways, it's so much easier now to get people's attention than it ever was before. I mean, yes, I know it's a cluttered social media landscape, but you have instant access to everybody, basically. So that would be my message, is just to try and get it out there and on any platform, any way that you can.
Okay. Same, just continue to drive as much content as we can. 7 months ago, I get this message on Instagram from this woman, Marlene Hess, who said, hi, I'm the founder of an organization called Black Girls Hockey Club. And she said, I'm happy to know that you're there, and I want you to know that there are a lot of black women all over North America that love the sport. She said, we have a network of 100 women, and we want to go to a game and really show our prowess. And so 7 months later, we organized their first ever game. Everybody came from all over the country to Washington, D.C. to a Caps game. And they brought their families. There were 45 of them, ages from 6 to 90. And we organized the entire weekend so that they came in on a Thursday. That Friday, we had a tour of the African American Smithsonian Museum. The Caps hosted them. One of the owners of the Caps, Earl Stafford, who happens to be black, hosted the group for dinner. I mean, it was amazing. And as a result of that, now 3 other clubs have invited them to come to games. So it was that one note to me on Instagram, and that being the catalyst to exposing them. And now they have 60 women as a result of the 45 going to Washington that are going to Nashville. And so they're going for the All-Star game, the Women's All-Star game, and for an NHL game. So we just got to keep doing it, one thing at a time. One bite of the elephant, and you look up and the elephant is eaten up.
I like that. One last question. I know you had your hand up for a while, and I saw you, and I said, oh, I got to get her question in there.
I watch a lot of hockey on TV, on YouTube. I attend a lot of local games, CWHL and everything. I watch some NWHL games on YouTube. I know that the women's game is faster and faster. It's been faster and faster over the years. And I'm wondering, as women's hockey games are becoming more popular and are reaching new audiences on, out there, if there'll be a pressure to have maybe body checking being introduced in women's hockey. And, we have full face protection in women's hockey. I see so many injuries happening on TV for guys, and I'm thinking a full face would have just fixed that. It would have been just prevented. And I'm like, oh my goodness, technology is out there, the equipment is out there. We can save some pretty faces and teeth and all that. So I'm wondering if it's going to be, if body checking and more physical things will have to be introduced, because sometimes people believe that it's all part of the game. Body checking and fighting, of course, is very strict. Referees are very strict.
I can talk to it because we had body checking when I was playing. And if you look at the NHL, there's no body checking anymore. So they're going the opposite way. At least I don't see a whole lot of it happening. And even in Junior A, or the OHL anyway, not a lot of body checking. I think with concussions and with careers and the business, there's just too much at stake. So for us to go back and say that we're going to bring body checking back into the game, not a chance. They've just I think this past year, removed it from single A hockey in minor hockey for boys, from all levels, right up to midget. And now there's non-body checking leagues for, I believe, bantam, which is at the rep level, because parents just are saying it's not worth it. And I just really can't see that happening.
Okay, well, that wraps
Thank you.
our Q&A.
Finally, we would like to thank our wonderful panel and our venue partner. How lucky are we to be able to host this event here at the Hockey Hall of Fame? So we'll give our gifts to our panel, and thank you so much again for joining us.